Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and fit-like, welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network, the home of so many amazing podcasts. We have Nerd Nuptial on a Monday, and we now have the A24 Project also out on a Monday, me and Dallas's other podcast, and all the way to Sunday where we have things like Missing Frames, which recently covered watching Hocus Pocus for the first time, which I personally found it hard to believe that no one has ever seen that movie. So there's always something exciting and surprising for people to watch there. So Dallas, how are you today?
Very well. I'm just cracking open an iron brew to enjoy the podcast with.
Our official sponsor as well.
Yes, hopefully the official sponsor of the Filibuster podcast. But looking forward to discussing a couple of good films this week and going through a few of our favourite Scottish. There was a bit of a Scottish theme going on this week, isn't there?
Absolutely. People always talk that there should be representation in film criticism and discussion, and obviously sometimes we're discussing movies where perhaps we're not the the most qualified people to discuss them, but in this case today we are the most qualified individuals. So if you want to hear Scottish people discussing Scottish cinema, awful Scottish accents, good Scottish accents, then this is the podcast for you. We are proudly Scottish, and so obviously we'll discuss some of our favourite Scottish films and Scottish moments in films. But Dallas, as always, we always like to chat about what have you kind of been watching in the past week while you've been at the cinema.
Well, at the cinema, the only thing I've seen is Widows, which I believe you saw at the London Film Festival. And I was very, very entertained by it. I thought it was a fantastic, slick heist film full of fantastic performances. And I was very, very impressed. I felt the same way almost as when I watched Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by David Fincher. It's like seeing, one of these well-respected sort of directors who sort of almost taking on a genre sort of material. I mean, David Fincher's going to do it again soon with World War Z 2. Very random news story, but I think Steve McQueen, who's obviously done Hunger, Shame, which I thought was absolutely mind-blowing, 12 Years a Slave, which I wasn't actually all that keen on. It's one of those things that you probably shouldn't really say, but I felt, again, I think it was as we were talking about last week with First Man, I felt very cold towards it. I wasn't emotionally engaged as much as I should have been with it. Again, maybe that's an issue about representation of film and stuff like that. But I thought he did a fantastic job with Widows. It felt to me like almost a spiritual sequel to Heat. If Heat had followed on from the wives and girlfriends of the gang that Al Pacino's character had basically taken down, it's like, what would have happened to them? What happens to the women who are left behind, when a job goes wrong and all these men are taken out? And that is essentially what Widows is after like almost 30 seconds of the film. It's like, this is the world, this is the situation, what happens? And I was just thoroughly entertained. I thought it was one of the slickest sort of, I wouldn't really call it a blockbuster, but sort of slickest genre films I've seen this year.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see it about a month ago at the London Film Festival, and it was obviously the film to open the festival as well. And I'm the same as you, it's not a blockbuster, but it's one of the finest sort of decently sized, big budget movies that's, not a kind of Marvel movie or, something along those lines. And I found it full of really good performances. And yeah, I was the same as you, it's a nice spiritual companion to something like Heat. And I love that the film is this, it's all about these different characters and how they all interact and cross over. And you have this idea, perhaps with a heist, you're thinking of something like, an Ocean's 13 or Ocean's 11, something along those lines, where it's building up, it's going to be this big heist, how's it all going to unfold and what's going to happen and what's going to be the plan for the plan if the plan doesn't come off. And the heist, it maybe takes up what 5-10 minutes perhaps at most of the film. It's really all about getting to that moment and what it takes, and I found it to be really good. Viola Davis was excellent, and it's just such a fantastic cast, and I really enjoyed it. I think and I think best supporting actor has easily been won by that cute little dog. I've seen it twice in a cinema, and in one of those odd little moments, audiences always seem to get a giggle when she goes into her friend's apartment and the dog goes down onto the floor and heads towards one of the cupboards, and it's just little bum shakes, and audiences at both times have gone, oh, that's lovely. It's just like, it's a weird moment. I think that dog has stolen stolen the acting from all these different big hitters.
Absolutely. I think, when I saw it on a Friday night, there's a bit where one of the sort of bad guys yanks the dog up, and you hadn't heard a reaction like it. They were like, oh, they better not do anything to the dog. Don't kill the dog. Whatever you do, don't kill the dog. But the entire cast is fantastic. Viola Davis is always good. But for me, the one that stole the show in terms of the female cast was Elizabeth Debicki. I thought she was just brilliant. She's been in some fantastic things like the Night Manager. I thought she was great in, and she's probably got the most complete arc, so to speak, of the female characters. She starts off as this sort of trophy wife who's got a black eye and stuff. She's very scared of her husband and whatever, and even of her mother. But of course, over the course of the film, she becomes more self-reliant, she's able to stand up for herself, and she the way she sort of ends up being able to manipulate people and stuff like that. I just thought it was a fantastic performance. All the women are great, but there's some great performances from the men. Colin Farrell, again, very underrated actor sometimes. I thought he was great. If I did have one complaint, it would probably be that, there's two complaints. One, maybe it all got wrapped up a little too quickly at the end, and certain storylines and plot threads didn't tie up. But again, I understand, looking back on it, why. It's because it's the storylines featuring the male characters, and this is a film essentially about these women. But the film needed more Daniel Kaluuya. I thought he was brilliant in the scenes he was in, and I needed more of him. I wanted to see what he did, because he was just almost so unpredictable and menacing in the scenes he was in. I really wanted to see more of that character. I thought he was absolutely fantastic.
But I think part of what made him so great was that he had only had a few scenes, and in those scenes it was always packed a punch. There was a tension when he appeared, and I think that scene right at the beginning where he's like, yeah guys, let me hear you rap, and it's like he's getting right in their face, like it's really awkward, and then he just blasts them away, lets one of them run, blasts them again, and then he just chooses these moments where he just swoops in, and there's a real sense of terror when he does. And imagine if he was in it perhaps more, and if he became a bit more fleshed out, that those moments would just lack the sense of dread that he brought with him when he arrived in perhaps a bowling club, or when he appears in a van or anything like that. I thought he was really an interesting kind of character, and I would love to have had more of it, but what little we got of it just really just terrified me.
Yeah, no, I can see your point, but that brings me on to one of the other great things was some of the cinematography in this was fantastic. Like you say, that shot where it's basically a tracking shot around these two rappers while Daniel Kaluuya is getting in their faces and sort of moving in and out, and that was brilliant. And there was some other shots, like this great shot of Colin Farrell and I think it was his wife or girlfriend, sort of having this campaign talk in a car, where it starts outside the car. You only hear the conversation. It starts on one side of the car and then moves across to the other side of the car. And it wasn't until I was like, wow, what is happening with the shot? But then sort of realized that they were actually showing just what short a distance there was between, this rundown, poor area of Chicago and his house, which is this, this very nice posh house and stuff like that. And, there was these juxtaposition shots, and I just thought some of the cinematography was fantastic. But, it's what you expect from a director called Steve McQueen, who, is just, for me, working at the top of his game just now.
Yeah, it was really good. My only real kind of criticism, and it's rare that I take issue with the great man himself, but I thought Hans Zimmer's score seemed very, very similar to another Chicago-based movie that had some parallels with Heat, and I was sitting there going, this is basically The Dark Knight. It was just a bit. I thought I was kind of hoping for a bit more from Hans Zimmer.
Well, there's only so many notes in the world. He's going to end up repeating himself one time or another.
Absolutely. And kind of on a very Scottish note, Outlaw King finally arrived on Netflix as well this week, and this is a film that has been, for a Netflix movie, in particular Scotland, has been really kind of ramping up with sort of a bit of a publicity tour. I can't walk down Princes Street without seeing it advertised on the side of bus shelters. It had a UK premiere, had a premiere here in Edinburgh. They've been really kind of invested in this film and making sure that Scottish audiences are familiar with it, aware of it. They seem to have been interviewed by every single Scottish journalist here in the country as well. And it finally arrived here on Netflix last Friday, so obviously Nerd Nuptial have done a review of it on Monday. But Dallas, as a fellow Scot, what did you make of your history represented in Outlaw King, and did Chris Pine live up to the Scottish accent test?
Well, speaking of Chris Pine and interviewing, did you not speak to Chris Pine at the London Film Festival? Do I remember that?
Yes,
yeah.
So now you can listen to my interviews with Chris Pine, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Tony Curran and Gillian Berrie, who talked with me about the making of Outlaw King. Hi there, Chris. How did it feel to play a Scottish legend, and what kind of pressure comes with playing a Scotsman, the Scottish accent, swearing the right way?
Well, I figured I would be crucified by some people, so I kind of gave up trying to be a perfect Scotsman early on. I had an incredible dialect coach. I worked with mainly Scottish men in the largest fraternity of mean actors of all time. And they were brutally honest with me and kept me in line. And I lived in Glasgow for 4 months and just tried to soak up as much as I could. And in terms of playing Robert the Bruce, it's a challenge I couldn't turn down. And the man is 600 some odd years old, and in order to pin down who this guy was is a bit more difficult than I thought, so I tried to do justice to the script that was given to me and the character that I saw on the page.
Well, thank you very much. We thought your Scottish accent was great, so
Thank you very much.
Aaron, it's a very kind of intense project, that part. Were you able to kind of distance yourself from the intensity of the story and kind of have fun on set with the cast as well?
I think, like in anything, you should distance yourself from the character you're playing, but I think it's also, my process kind of differs from others, and I think the way I like to do is to stay in character as much as possible when I'm, on set, that's for sure. And it was very emotional and dark, and it was a pretty relentless shoot. So, there is a lot you kind of carry with you, and you got to somehow shed that. It's just kind of how the job goes, really, sometimes.
Well, all the best.
Hi Tony, nice to meet you.
Hi there, Tony, with obviously the incredible calibre, now Outlaw King. How does it feel to be the Netflix leading man for Scotland?
You're hilarious. It's great. No, isn't it funny that Calibre, some people call it Calibre, is actually having a cinema release?
Yeah,
so
no, it's brilliant.
Great. So that's great. That's coming out. It's great. It's great to be in London. It's great to be going up to Edinburgh to show everybody the film. So I'm hearing the music here. I'm getting a wee bit excited again.
No, we'll get Run Brig on in a moment, I think.
I've met you before, though.
Yeah, we did a Calibre interview.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to seeing the film again, and I'm thrilled.
Excellent. Well, all the best tonight, and thanks for making us all proud. Cheers. Hi there, James.
Hi.
As a fellow Scot, I felt a real sense of pride in this, not just as Scottish filmmaker and talent. What do you feel when you look back on your experience with this film as a Scottish man and an actor?
Well, I was just very proud that Scotland's been lucky enough to produce some fine actors, a wonderful director in David Mackenzie, and for the Scottish producers to put this together, and to go to Netflix, and all credit to Netflix for putting their faith in it, and thanks to Chris Pine for wanting to be in it. Absolutely. And so I'm very, very proud.
Absolutely. I share that pride with you, and good
Great.
luck there.
Thank you
Cheers.
so much. Thank you.
James, how are you? Obviously, as a Scottish producer, how much of a challenge is shooting in Scotland at the moment? Because obviously we don't have the studios, but we've got so much talent. Where does the Scottish kind of film studios and the system need to go in the next few years?
I believe we will have a Scottish studio very soon. We'll certainly where Outlander is filming right now in Cumbernauld. There's another Scottish Government have doubled the funding. So we've gone from 10 million to 20 million, and that just happened 6 months ago. So in my opinion, and in my lifetime, it hasn't been better. So bring on the studio, and I'm going to be doing everything in my power to encourage that and to make it happen as fast as possible.
I got a real sense of pride as a Scot in the amount of Scottish talent that's used in this film. Amazing. In every respect. What was it like for you to bring all that kind of talent together in this brilliant movie, and now it's getting shared all around the world?
I'm so proud of them, and the Scottish club technicians and all the freelancers did such an amazing job, and our Scottish cast were phenomenal. I mean, there's not a bad turn in there at all. They're just such a talented bunch, and I think that over the past 10 years we've hemorrhaged a lot of cast and crew to other countries, but now Scotland is a really exciting place to work. So I know already that there are a lot of big movies looking at Scotland already, and certainly I intend to continue making.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for flying the flag in every respect. I appreciate it. All the best. So yeah, there was my interviews with them from a cold night in Leicester Square. But Dallas, I somewhat hyped this movie up quite a bit, I think, to anyone and everyone that would listen about what an enjoyable romp this was. How did this movie kind of land for you then?
Yeah, no, I was entertained by it. Yeah, I think I agree with what you said to Chris. I thought his Scottish accent was very good, especially for an American. I thought it was great, much better than the main accent from the lead actor of another Scottish historical epic from around about 23 years ago. He did a much more acceptable job on my ears. And yeah, no, I mean, you got to see it in London on the big screen. Now, this is a film which really would benefit from the big screen treatment, especially in the sort of final sort of battle sequences. I mean, I remember taking a photo of it on my iPad, and because it's 2:39, the amount of black space almost overshadowed the rest of the film. So luckily I came home on the Friday night, watched it on my TV, and yeah, no, I thought it was very good. It starts off with this fantastic 8-minute or 9-minute long sort of tracking shot introducing all the characters in the scene as these Scottish lords and stuff pledge allegiance once again to King Edward, played by Stephen Delane from Game of Thrones. And immediately, you can tell he's a rotten, and you're going to want these people to basically rise up against him and break the oath. And I thought Chris Pine was great. I thought the guy who played the Prince of Wales was fantastic as well. And I mean, it's one of those things where I'm not entirely sure how accurate it is history-wise, but certainly as an entertaining alternative take, sort of looking at what happened sort of post-Braveheart, I thought it was very good. I mean, the final battle sequence for me was potentially even better than Braveheart, I thought. Now, I've been experimenting going slightly vegan during certain months and whatever, and trying to cut down my meat intake, but I don't know if it was the vegan in me or whatever, but I was just sitting there watching that final battle sequence going, how did they not manage to kill or hurt any horses in the making of this film? I mean, I remember thinking the same thing in Braveheart. I mean, it is so visceral and so on the nose. It was just like, oh my God, it's like you're really properly in there with them. And yeah, no, I thought it was great. And I loved the music at the end by Catherine Joseph. She's a singer who's sort of from the Aberdeen area, and I've been to a couple of her gigs. She's got just one of these sort of haunting, powerful voices, and I thought that was just a beautiful way to end it. But I believe I heard there was potentially some discrepancy as to the version that you saw at the London Film Festival and the version I watched on Netflix, because I hear there's a missing piece of text at the end of it. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah, you would be, yeah. So, and I'm going to say your homework is to get that singer onto the podcast. Well, we've got to try and get her kind of nailed down for an interview. But so when I saw it, like, when I went to see it in London, so obviously it'd been at Toronto about 3 weeks to a month earlier, so it had received a bit of sort of some mixed reviews kind of coming out of Toronto. And when you go into these press screenings, you get like, this is how long the film runs, no trailers, and this film was given a runtime of 2 hours 20 minutes. And I remember looking at my watch, in and around just about the 2 hour point, going, this is kind of wrapping up pretty quickly here. I don't know where this extra 20 minutes is going to be. And then it ended So the film, when it was scheduled in, still had the original Toronto running time. So it had been edited down quite a bit. They had removed a scene at the beginning where Robert the Bruce bumps into William Wallace in the trees. And there was apparently a chase sequence as well that had been cut out. So somewhat with the frustration that these films don't really ever get sort of a Blu-ray or DVD release. These are probably deleted scenes that we will perhaps never see. But there was a line at the end where, and it's pretty much the exact same shots. You see him reunited with his lovely wife. And then it tells you in the film, and in 300 years' time, I can't remember the exact thing, Scotland and England will become united under this certain king. Okay, that's it. And I was like to my girlfriend when we were watching Netflix, I gave her a wee nudge. I was like, a really good line's coming up here. Look what it says at the bottom. And my girlfriend likes to watch it with subtitles. And I was like, oh, maybe the subtitles were just over this line. But when I saw it in London, and I spoke with a friend, a fellow critic, Ross, he said to me when he watched it on a Netflix screener only a few weeks earlier than actually this even release, it had this line where it was like, and in 300 years' time, blah, 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 Scotland and England would become united, ... But that's another story, which is kind of a wink and a nod to this sort of difficult history between Scotland and England. And it's, it played very well with that audience. We all had a wee chuckle, like, oh yeah, that's quite good. And then it's more just straight-faced and historical. And I can sort of understand why they've changed it, because I think they've been at pains because, something like Braveheart is very notorious with the independence movement and the National Party here in Scotland. And I think they have been at pains that this film isn't a kind of spiritual brother of what that film's become. And I think they perhaps took that out because they might look at that and go, oh, David Mackenzie is making a nod about how terrible England is and we shouldn't be with them, or look how that turned out, we've had independence referendums and so on. So I think perhaps I can see why they've removed it, but it certainly was a really good moment. And perhaps it's just going to be one of those things that was just of the Toronto screening and the London screening, and just part of that really quite last minute just editing, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, it certainly would have got a laugh, but I can understand the reasoning behind it, especially with moving towards March 2019 and everything that's going to happen with Brexit. I can imagine that they wouldn't want to potentially stoke the flames or any more of any potential. I mean, it might play well in Scotland, but then again, if you're watching it somewhere else in England or whatever, they might not like that. So I can understand why they've done it, but it certainly would have been a fun thing to see. But I mean, yeah, it did sort of it was one of the films, even though it seems to have 20 minutes taken out, it did seem to potentially maybe slightly affect the ending of the film, where it's sort of truncated down to some sort of text about, oh, and then Robert the Bruce would go on to do this and this and this, and you've got, it sort of ends with the reunition with his wife, played by Florence Pugh, I thought was great in this film, and she was great in Lady Macbeth from last year and stuff like that. So she's really a star on the rise as well. But it's really got a great cast. You've got Netflix sort of lucky charm Tony Curran in there. Between this and Caliber, he's basically the go-to guy for Netflix. If you need a Scottish film to basically get a great reception, then that's what you need to do. Get him in the film. You've got James Cosmo at the start, who I said has basically been in every Scottish historical epic ever, so you need to have him in it as well. And I thought it was Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who is an actor who in certain things I've not liked at all, but recently I've started to get more on side with him. I thought he was great in Nocturnal Animals and stuff like that, and this again, he was great as Black Douglas. So I mean, what were your other takes on it?
I loved Aaron Taylor-Johnson. When I saw this movie in London, everyone that I spoke with that came out of that screen and went, how great was Aaron Taylor-Johnson? That I think he steals the show in this movie. He is so funny, and it's just like his single obsession with really getting up the English and getting people to say his name. Like, there's several scenes of him just literally killing people, going, Douglas! And in the final battle where he's just like slaying the English and he's like, say my effing name, and it's just like, and there's a bit where it doesn't have the same impact on the TV when you're watching it in the cinema, and he's frothing at the mouth, like just at the thought of facing the English. It's just another one of those great moments, and he has just got such a great intensity, and I was really impressed by them. He continues to be really exciting in movies, and I just found it to be I'm not really into these kind of Scottish historical movies, you know. Braveheart, I don't really care for. And with this, I kind of was going in expecting like, oh, it's going to be an interesting kind of Netflix movie. It'll be what it'll be. And I came out of it probably one of the most enjoyable blockbusters I've seen kind of this year, because it was just like it's one of these ones that I can appreciate that people maybe want some more time with it. And you know, I heard there was an original cut that was 4 hours, but you know, things like that are pretty meaningless. And then also there's the time lost between that and Toronto. But I really enjoyed it. It goes so fast paced. It just really builds up to an exciting climax. And I'm not expecting sort of Game of Thrones style, like 4 hour epic that, you know, hour at a time. I just think it was quite a breathless movie, and, you know, it sets up so early in that first 9 minutes, that one take, where you get immediately gripped by it, and you're like, this is really something fascinating and interesting. It's just filled with such theatrical characters. It's all a bit over the top. I mean, I've seen people that have been tweeting and reviewing it going, I'm English, but bloody hell, do I hate the English in this movie. They are the ultimate bad guy in a movie like this. So someone like Thanos has immediately been knocked off the top of the list by the English in this movie. And Billy Howell, who plays the Prince of Wales, who was absolutely brilliant on Chesil Beach this year, I think was so good as the snivelling Prince Edward. And yeah, it was in a film that I just genuinely had such an enjoyable time watching, and it made me happy and enjoyed it. And it made you proud that it was filmed in Scotland. It had a lot of Scottish talent, a lot of Scottish directors, producers, everyone was involved, and it feels like a really Scottish movie. And it makes you proud that we're doing something right here in Scotland. We're not just making low budget movies. Sometimes we're making our own big action adventure movies, and I'm really glad that it's going all around the world, and hopefully people are going to really resonate and enjoy it as much as perhaps I did.
There was a couple of moments which I imagine this film would absolutely benefit from a big cinematic viewing, especially with an audience. And imagine the screenings at Glasgow Film Theatre and Film House in Edinburgh at the moment are playing like gangbusters, absolutely. And the moments when it's like, how can we make sure that they know that this is a Scottish film and filmed in Scotland? Well, why not have a wife go, where the fuck have you been, when her husband comes home after a couple of months, or calling a kid a cheeky wee shite for not knowing who Robert the Bruce was. You know, it's moments like that I laughed on my own watching it here, so I imagine that they played absolutely fantastically in the theatre. So,
well, I have a friend, and I'm sure he's listening, so hello to Alan McKenna. But this man was the most excited person I've ever met for Outlaw King. He's a friend of mine, former flatmate, you know, one of the nicest people I've ever known. And he messaged me when I'd come out of London going, like, he was excited for this movie. He's like, oh, tell me what you think. I came out of the London Film Festival, and he immediately messaged me, what did you think? And I was like, man, I really liked it. And he was asking me, like, oh, is this in it? You know, he'd always be asking me questions. And he got tickets to go see it on the big screen, so I think he saw it on the Monday. And he's like to me, like, oh, Lee, should I watch it on Netflix before going to see it on the big screen? I was like, take it from me, watch it on the big screen first, make that be your first experience, then you've always got it on Netflix, you can always watch it from there. It's like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So come Friday, he messaged me going, I'm sorry, Lee, I've already watched it on Netflix. And by the end of Sunday, when I let him know I was watching it again, he told me he'd watched it 4 times. And then when he went to see it yesterday on the big screen, he absolutely was blown away by the big screen experience. And you know, he's been such a great guy, so I'm going to share what his thoughts and what he messaged me about the big screen experience. And he was like, it just made everything so much better. I still can't understand why it's not everywhere right now in theatres. It's genuinely a stunning film. The music this time around was extra emotional, if that makes sense, especially when the Bruce and the wee lad hold the crown together. So it's little things like that where you can enjoy the score on your TV, your sound system, but there's something about it being played in like a big screen. And I'm sure Alan will see that more than 5 or 6 more times probably in the next few weeks. So yeah, I'm really happy. This film seems to be, you know, really playing well with an audience. And obviously Tristan and the girl enjoyed it as well. You know, they had a few issues with it, but it seems to be getting quite a bit of attention, and in some ways positive, in some ways a bit like, oh, here we go, it's another thing about Chris Pine's Pine, as it were. But yeah, I think it's a movie that is doing Scotland proud.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, Netflix were Netflix UK was rebranded as Netflix Scotland over the weekend. This was actually one of their original films, which they actually seem to be actively pushing. They released the week before the Orson Welles documentary and his film. But, you had to actually struggle to find that on Netflix. But this one, they've actually gone with a big push, having, posters for Queer Eye and BoJack Horseman and a synopsis of Breaking Bad that was basically your dad sells meth. To which I replied, well, technically, Breaking Bad in the UK would just be a guy who really wants to sell drugs because his cancer treatment would have been covered by the NHS, but that's another story. But, we could talk about the elephant's trunk in the room regarding Chris Pine, but I think we're not going to lower ourselves to that level. But I was talking to someone today about it, and they actually asked me, why Chris Pine? Why did an American play Robert the Bruce? I had to get into this whole conversation of, well, you don't have to. I mean, look at all these British actors going over and playing American superheroes. But, Chris Pine worked with David Mackenzie before on the excellent Hell or High Water. But, if you're making a Scottish film about, Robert the Bruce or something, basically, unless you can get Gerard Butler, Ewan McGregor or James McAvoy, if all three of those are busy, then you're probably, in order to get financing, going to have to look outside and get an American or, someone like that to play it. And, I thought he was great. I didn't think it mattered whatsoever. It was, he was right for the part. His accent was great, and I think he did a very admirable job. As Robert Bruce.
I think one of these things that I can understand why would he, but Chris Pine has such a presence about him that I think you see that on the screen. You have to look at him, and he has to have that physical embodiment where you believe this is a man that could lead an army to that would inspire the religious people, the people behind him, all these different houses and clans together behind him. And I know this will sound like sort of humble brag and stuff about obviously interviewing Chris Pine, but he's one of those people, I've watched him for years on things like Star Trek and Hell or High Water, and I remember just when I was on sort of the red carpet, I was all the other way at the bottom end of it, the online press get all just bummed to the end, and you've got to wait your turn for all these people, and sometimes they don't even get down as far as you. And I remember being real excited, Chris Pine's going to be here, I'm going to get the chance to potentially interview him. I remember just looking down the red carpet and seeing him, clocking in for the first time, and he's got this really presence about him. He seems taller than everyone, he's got a really good build. And you look at him and think, he seems like a really strong character and man. And you just sort of, you don't often get that. And I've been lucky enough with this to have met many famous people or seen them at talks over the years in Edinburgh. We're a bit of a hub for these things. But he was one of the first times I ever looked at someone and I thought, wow, you get a real sense of perhaps a king or someone that you'd rally behind. So I can certainly see why they picked Chris Pine, because he knocks that out in a room when he enters it, or onto a red carpet in this case.
#man crush.
Yeah, absolutely. Though I haven't got it out of my head that there's a tweet going around just now that compares him as the Outlaw King to the Burger King guy, and people cannot get that out of their head. So it's one of those things. It's slightly, oh no, but yeah, Chris Pine, only love, brother.
Yeah, I saw that one with I've seen the one where it's basically the Queer Eye for the Straight Guy have done it again, and basically spruced him up to look like Chris Pine. So no, it was good. But I thought he was great in the film and absolutely worthy of the role, I thought.
Absolutely. So this week, we always like to do a bit of a top 5 movies, and we decided this week to fly the flag for our home country here. Our favourite films, not just shot in Scotland, but also based here in Scotland. So we've chosen 5 different movies that we think showcases our country at our finest, some of our favourite films perhaps here in Scotland. And I'm always curious, Dallas, what have you gone with as your number 5 choice?
Well, my number 5 choice is a film which is, I'd say, probably about at least a third or a half to set in Scotland, but is potentially a slightly controversial choice because of the casting more than anything else, and that is the 1986 sci-fi classic Highlander, or Highlander.
Interesting.
Highlander.
Highlander, yeah.
Highlander. Yeah. So Obviously,
Highlander.
potentially more famous now for its soundtrack by Queen, but it tells the story of an immortal called Connor MacLeod, played by a Frenchman who is trained up in sword fighting by a Spaniard/Egyptian, played by the most famous Scottish actor in the world, who has to face down the Kurgan in a final fight for the quickening, because there can be only one. It's just at times a ridiculous, cheesy sci-fi epic, but there's just something which I just really enjoy about Highlander, and yeah, for me, that's why it's at my number 5.
I have never seen this movie, and I know this came up in a conversation
Yep.
behind the scenes, in the Nerd Party group chat, where I think I'd said, I've never seen it, and I think Sean Eastridge, host of the Great Missing Frames, was like, I've never seen it either. So I think there's a bit of a talk behind the scenes that this could be something that we might work on together.
I think it's absolutely a film which I'd be very interested to see your thoughts and Sean's thoughts on a first viewing of this one now, because I took my wife to see it couple of years ago. I think it was when it had the 30th anniversary screenings, and she actually kind of enjoyed it. I think she enjoyed the soundtrack more than the rest of the film, but it is cheesy, but there's something really nice about it, and it does contain my all-time favorite Queen song, which is Who Wants to Live Forever, and which was scandalously used in Bohemian Rhapsody recently, because technically when the film was set, that song hadn't been released, but that's just a pedantic bastard in me, so yeah. But yeah, no, definitely worth a watch.
I'm curious, like, there's a Highlander TV show, isn't there? Like,
yeah,
I've seen people talking about this. Like, why does it feel like Highlander is more popular around the world than it is here in Scotland? Like, I've never seen the TV show ever mentioned, and the only reason I know about it is, like, a fan of the Nerd Party, and he's been on Filibuster a few times, Norman C. Lau, was, like, Facebooking about this Highlander TV show. I'm like, the hell are you talking about? And it was actually a real thing. I'm baffled by it.
Yeah, no, I think the first Highlander is kind of popular in Scotland. I think all the other ones are not. I mean, apparently, from what I've never seen anything but the original one. I've never seen the TV series. I've never seen the sequels, which, for all extensive purposes, I've heard are completely terrible. So I'm just leaving it, because there can be only one. So I'm only watching the first Highlander. I'm not going to watch any of the others. Although there's the talk of the remake was at one point going to star Dave Bautista as the Kurgan, but we're not going to get into that one. So what have you got at your number 5?
Well, I've gone with one because it's a movie I've not been able to shake, and it's been nearly about kind of 5-6 months since I originally seen it. And you touched upon it earlier, and that's Calibre, the Netflix movie all about a Scottish hunting trip gone wrong. And it's one of these ones. It's not the most original story in the world. We can draw connotations with things like Straw Dogs, for example, and other such movies. But it has just been one of those ones I've not been able to shake the fear of watching this movie. Still there'll be plenty of people that will have not seen this film. Well, it got a good publicity campaign. It's nothing compared to Outlaw King, so I suspect a lot of people still haven't seen this film, or perhaps know that it's in amongst all these many other Netflix movies. But written and directed by Edinburgh's own Matt Palmer, it brings together Jack Lowden, Martin McCann, Tony Curran, Katie Bracken, and it's all about this hunting trip into the Highlands gone wrong. And it's been one of those movies that's filled with genuinely some terrifying moments and experiences, and it's one of these ones it's another rare Scottish movie that has made it onto Netflix and is going all around the world. And we get to see what obviously the numbers that people download our podcasts on Filibuster are, and the Calibre episodes where we did 2, we interviewed the cast and crew and Matt Palmer a bit, and then we had an extended interview with Matt Palmer. It's been one of our most popular interview episodes, and it seems to be one of these ones that not many people have had the chance to talk to these people about these movies. They've done some they've recently done a tour of the movie, actually, kind of around England and into Scotland as well, and recently, so it seems to be getting a real sense of buzz, that people are seeing this film, whether it was at the time or recently or word of mouth, and people are finding our podcast and listening to it. So it shows that people are really interested in this movie all around the world, and it's one I think is fantastic, and it won quite a few awards coming out of the Edinburgh Film Festival. also a great write-up in something like Variety, and it's a movie I just think is really good, and I want to see more movies like this being made in Scotland and getting a worldwide audience, whether that's on Netflix or in cinemas.
Absolutely. I mean, this was one that was probably very close to being in my top 5. It will definitely be in my top 10 of this year. I mean, I think at the moment, we keep saying, it's absolutely, you need to see these films on the big screen, you need to see these films on the big screen, but 2 of my top 10 at the moment are films I've seen on Netflix, which is Caliber and Annihilation. And, Caliber it recently won at BAFTA Scotland Awards. It won Best Actor for Jack Lowden, although basically Caliber was guaranteed that award because the 3 people nominated were Martin McCann, Jack Lowden, and Tony Curran. So it was a win-win either way. So that was great. But yeah, no, it was a fantastic film. One that I'd known a little bit about. Thankfully, I hadn't watched the trailer or anything, and it was genuinely shocking what happens that turns the hunting trip bad, and it's just played out so well. Like you say, it's not the most original of concepts, but it's just acted superbly. Great direction from Matt Palmer, and yeah, no, I think he's a filmmaker to watch in the future. And, hopefully a lot more people will find it on Netflix, hopefully, because people have watched Outlaw King. It will say, well, if you like this, you'll like this. So hopefully it will start to appear on people's sort of radars on Netflix, having watched Outlaw King.
I'm only going to say one thing. BAFTA Scotland, I'm sorry, we're idiots. But for some reason, Caliber got all the nominations in Best Male Actor, Best Writer, Best Director, but didn't get a Best Film nomination, and I am absolutely baffled by that choice. I do not understand how something can be nominated for all of those things and then not receive an award for Best Film. Absolutely baffling. Be that on BAFTA's head, that stupid decision.
Yeah, no, I think it was a very poor decision, and I haven't seen The Parties Just Beginning by Karen Gillan, but for me, a film which actually hasn't got a release date yet should not really be able to qualify. I can understand why they may be wanting to give it a platform and stuff like that, but really, Caliber should have definitely been in there. And I mean, The Death of Stalin, how Scottish is that? I mean, it was financed by Scotland clearly, but beyond that, I mean, yeah. So yeah, we're not pointing any fingers, BAFTA, but I'm pointing a finger.
Absolutely. So there could only be one at number 5. So what's your number 4?
Number 4 is actually the only film on my list which is actually directed by a Scotsman, and that is Filth by John S. Baird, based on the novel by Irvine Welsh, and featuring one of the best performances I have ever seen in my life by James McAvoy as a Detective Inspector Bruce Robertson. And yeah, it's basically adapted by Welsh's novel about one of the most corrupt, obscene, racist, bigoted, sexist, foul-mouthed, horrible, loathsome human beings, who is basically scheming his way to the top and doing anything he can to be the best. He's got to be the best, same rules apply. He'll do whatever it takes. But as loathsome as this character is, as it gets towards the end and you find out why he is the man he is, and you end up, your heart breaks for him, and a lot of that is down to James McAvoy's performance. It is one of the best things I've ever seen, and for me, that's why it's at my number 4.
Yeah, mine, it just missed out for me as well. I thought it was a fantastic film, and it's one of these movies that we do them so well in Scotland, whether it's something like this or Train Spotting. We do these really conflicted characters that, are really well, and I just think it's funny, it's tragic, and it threads that needle really, really well. And as I say, James McAvoy is probably one of his best roles in this, and perhaps one of his most underseen films, perhaps outside of kind of the UK anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, he won several awards. He won a BAFTA Scotland Award, they got that decision right. He won several awards for this performance, but it's one which I really wish more people would go and see. Now, John S. Baird is, he's from Peterhead, but because Peterhead is a very small town north of Aberdeen, he basically kind of gets lumped as being from Aberdeen. But, so we always champion him in this neck of the woods, and he's going to be sort of around the beginning of the year. He's got Stan and Ollie, the biopic about Laurel and Hardy, which closed the London Film Festival this year. So he's got great things to come. But he's a great director. He manages to just capture the right tone, because this is a film which, it could have gone either way. It could have been like just so off-putting that people didn't enjoy it, or but they managed to, like you say, thread that very delicate needle of finding the right path through to the character. And it's up there. It proves that Irvine Welsh is one of the great Scottish writers. Is it as good as Trainspotting? I guess we'll find out later on in the list, perhaps.
Absolutely. I think we can definitely safely assume that. So my number 4 is the 24th movie in the James Bond franchise, and that's Skyfall. And with James Bond, that we're so used to James Bond visiting some of the most glamorous locations all around the world, from Barbados to Far East Asia. And in this movie, the 50th anniversary of James Bond, we knew he was going to be coming to Scotland, but how much he was going to be there remained to be seen. Scotland has appeared a couple times over the years in James Bond films, and never for too long. And in this movie, it's absolutely brilliant. The locations that they visit, they're up there in kind of the Glencoe, nearby in Glen Etvie, driving around the Highlands. I've been lucky enough to kind of go up to that location kind of twice. I used to have a friend, her mother lived up in that neck of the woods, so whenever we'd go up to visit her, we'd head up north, and we would bypass sort of these locations. And there's photos of me and some different friends each time, always posing at the locations near where Bond and M are kind of looking out on sort of the Scottish Highlands. And what I love about this film, it's not just the fact that it's a James Bond movie, but it's the same things, for better or worse, that Harry Potter has brought, that it helps boost tourism in Scotland, and we're always looking at ways that we can do that. For years we market ourselves as a country of golf and whiskey, and over the years, things like Avengers in Edinburgh, Harry Potter in the Highlands, Skyfall in the Highlands, Under the Skin in Glasgow, all these different places, we're starting to fill in this country as being a place where people can come and film, and TV and film, Outlander, everything like that. And the locations using Skyfall become so big for tourism, and that's can only be a good thing for Scotland. And it's such a great showcase that in this movie that made over $1 billion, was critically revered all around the world, that Scotland was up there with any of the leading Bond actors and Bond women. I think, Skyfall is a real treat as a Scot and a Scottish fan of James Bond.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've seen since, I think was it 2012, Skyfall? I mean, we've seen, you've had films like Prometheus were filmed here, Macbeth filmed with the Fassbender was filmed up in Skye. The Highlands, Dark Knight Rises was filmed here. Yeah, we've recently had Fast and Furious, the Hobbs and Shaw movie filmed in Glasgow. And there's actually a small budget film actually apparently filming in Aberdeen today and tomorrow, which I'm going to check out.
Yeah, I saw that.
To find out. So there's a lot more films coming to Scotland and actually featuring Scotland. There was that worry when they filmed Avengers here in Edinburgh that would it be Edinburgh in the final film? Thankfully it was. Again, another great showcase. But I mean, I think as the producer said in the Outlaw King interviews, there needs to be a film studio in Scotland, and hopefully with the spotlight now on Scotland in these big films, hopefully the Scottish government will move forward, build the studio, and we'll get more talent coming in and showing off what Scotland can do and what it has to offer.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more there. That we're very lucky to have all these films and TV shows showcasing Scotland, but we need to make sure that we're giving future generations a chance to shoot here, and we're not taking advantage of all this goodwill and all this money that's coming to Scotland. We need to build a studio. So I think we can certainly get behind that.
We don't want another Braveheart situation where we're celebrating Scotland, but most of it was filmed in Ireland for tax purposes. Yes, we don't want that. Get on the case, Scottish Government. So my number 3 film is, I think, a film which you briefly mentioned there, and a film which you'll be able to listen to on episode 4 of the A24 project. And it's not just because of that plug that I chose this film, but for me, my number 3 film set in Scotland is Under the Skin, starring Scarlett Johansson.
I should add that is also my number 3, so we're good to go here.
We're synced up here. Yep, no, as I say, if you want a proper spoiler-filled, in-depth conversation, check the A24 project, which will be coming out next Monday. But for me, it's a film which is inherently Scottish in the way that it is filmed. Scarlett Johansson drives around Glasgow and the outskirts of Glasgow in this white van, interacting with Glaswegians, and the banter she has with them is just like, she looks completely confused because she's an alien, but also I expect, even though if she wasn't an alien character, she would have. I mean, I had trouble at times understanding what these people were saying, but it showcases Scotland as this at times otherworldly place, but also a very beautiful, mystical place. And yeah, I thought for me it's one of my favorite films of the last 5 years, and even if it wasn't set in Scotland, it would be one of my favourite films, but it's absolutely up there near the top of my list. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's the same, because I think up until, it's been diversifying really in the past few years. It's been superhero movies, blockbuster movies, it's been smaller scale ones, TV shows. It felt for a long time that if you were thinking about a movie that was set in Scotland, it was about junkies, it was about despair, it was maybe a historical epic of centuries gone by. With something like this, like a sci-fi movie with a big blockbuster name like Scarlett Johansson starring, like that was only 2013, really 14, by the time it came out here in the UK. Like how much has changed since then, and it's a really exciting time to be here in Scotland. And something like Under the Skin being as special as it was for being a genre pick, having that kind of big name actor involved, it's now becoming a bit of the norm now here in Scotland, and I think that's something really exciting. I mean, we've only recently just had Scarlett Johansson back here in Edinburgh, at our own Waverley Station, so an exciting time for Scottish cinema. And Under the Skin is one of those most unique movies that we've probably ever had shot and filmed here in Scotland, and how it portrays Scotland for better and worse.
Absolutely, and it shows the real Scotland at times. I think it's not this Brigadoon fantasy world, or as downbeat as the Train Spotting with its chunkies and stuff. It just shows Scotland as it is, and that's what's one of the sort of refreshing things about it. This view of Glasgow shown through alien eyes, but it's still recognisable to anyone who's ever been in the centre of Glasgow, sort of driving down Sauchiehall Street on a Saturday night. It's completely relatable.
All too well. Yeah. So I'm curious, what's your number 2 then? If we've both agreed on number 3, is it going to be the same for number 2?
Potentially. I've already had one Irvine Welsh film, and this is another Irvine Welsh film, and it's the original Train Spotting from 1996. What about yourself?
I have lumped together Train Spotting and T2 Train Spotting. Ooh. So yeah, we've both lined up here.
Yeah, no, I was seriously considering Train Spotting 2, but didn't actually think to lump them together. I probably should have, because for me it was actually one of the most surprisingly enjoyable sequels, and it's completely different from Train Spotting. It just comes back to these characters later on, but I just thought there was something so wonderful about seeing these characters again, and the way that they basically picked up as if no time had passed whatsoever, and the chemistry was still there, so it was great. What I didn't like about Train Spotting 2 was that for some reason the geography was worse than in Avengers Infinity War, which managed to get it completely accurate, whereas there was a foot chase which didn't make any sense whatsoever, which was a cardinal sin for a film filmed in it. Surely someone must have known that was wrong. But anyway, I'm diversifying. What I want to talk about was the original Train Spotting for me, which was like one of those films which sort of defined my sort of film watching at that time, back in sort of 96, which means I must have seen it before I should have been allowed to, because I would have been 16 at the time.
I think every single Scottish person has watched Train Spotting before they should.
Yeah.
I've never met anyone. I've met one or two that have seen it originally in the cinema.
Yeah, no, I maybe didn't see it originally in the cinema, but I think I probably got it on VHS. I had the poster on my wall. It's one of those iconic things. It was around that time of Britpop and whatever, and it was the film which defined Britain for a while. And it was just, Danny Boyle's direction, the sound. I mean, the soundtrack was probably the biggest UK soundtrack of all time, probably still is. And it was just one of those defining cinematic experiences. And, it made Ewan McGregor a star, made Robert Carlyle a star, and for me, it's still one of the very best sort of films set in Scotland. Even though it's not directed by a Scot, he still manages to create this totally believable world from an incredible source novel. What about yourself? What is it that appeals to you so much?
Yeah, I think it's like, and it's the timing of it as well. That kind of early '90s, where you look at it and you think of what was Scottish cinema really like before, and it was very much. There was the odd movie that broke through as something that's made in Scotland, perhaps a local hero or something like that. But there was very few movies that seemed to define Scotland as a place. And then something like Trainspotting comes along, and it's really cool. You know, you don't just have the CD release, you have the 2 CD releases of it. You know, you have the posters on the wall, you have Lust for Life, you have the book, you have the play. I mean, I saw a play 10 years ago, something like that, where it was like a 3-hour version of Trainspotting performed by Oxford students, and on a stage where it just had like a swing tire. Like, it is a film that continues to break through different generations, and it is one of the most well performed, well shot movies. And the fact that the sequel, you know, knocked out of the park as well. I thought it was an absolutely brilliant sequel. You know, the fact that it didn't really retread, you know, what I expected it to perhaps do. I was really surprised by it, and I think Danny Boyle made a movie that was incredibly cool and incredibly Scottish at the same time, and that's something that I think we should be really proud of.
Absolutely, yeah. It's still, you know, up there, I think, because, yeah, like you say, before then, it was really, you know, for overseas audiences and stuff, if you ask them for like Scottish films, it'd be prime of Miss Jean Brodie or Greyfriars Bobby or Brigadoon or something like that. So, you know, it showed, you know, the real Scotland, and also it was that it was film 4, wasn't it? So it was like the birth of film 4, and, you know, just what they could really do. I mean, it actually wasn't the birth of film 4, but it was one that really catapulted film 4 into the mainstream of what they can do with British film, and it sort of gave it, well, not to put too fine upon it, but basically a shot in the arm. Gave British filmmaking a shot in the arm, shot of heroin, but and it just took things to another level, and yeah, for me it's still up there as one of the very, very best.
Absolutely. I think we definitely, from between our conversations on this episode and episode 4 of the A24 project, we definitely need to do something about film 4 soon, I think. Absolutely.
It could be, the film 4 project, who knows, maybe. But I think they've got a lot they've got a lot more films than A24, so it would take
we'll go with the top five film 4 movies, I think.
We'd have to do 4 an episode or something to get through at any kind of reasonable pace.
Yeah.
So I guess we're now down to the number 1 spot, so who wants to go first?
Yeah, you fire away. You went first.
I've got, for the number 1 film set in Scotland, so it's not got, you know, particularly Scottish talent involved, but for me, one of my all-time favourite horror films and films set in Scotland, it's the original Wicker Man.
Oh, for God's sake, that's my number 1 as well.
I didn't think you would go for that. I really didn't. But
it's one of my... I love it.
Yeah, no, it's... Oh, God, oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's one of the most iconic, possibly spoofed sort of horror films. You know, it inspired a Nicolas Cage remake, which is just bonkers insane, but it's so chilling, it's so well acted. I mean, Christopher Lee's performance in that is one of my favourite all-time performances, and it's just, you know, this unassuming, you know, good-natured police officer goes to this remote Scottish island to investigate the disappearance of a girl, and then ends up sort of involved in a more elaborate plot. Who believes, you know, this girl's going to be sacrificed because, you know, this pagan, you know, religion on the island believe it's the only way to restore, you know, their harvest and stuff like that. But everything is not as it seems, and yeah, no, for me, it is the finest film ever shot in Scotland.
And I think it's so good that people talk about, say, something like Sunshine on Leith. Oh my God, it's a Scottish musical. I consider The Wicker Man a musical, and I've had the soundtrack. I own it on vinyl. I just think it's one of these movies that combines so many great genres. It's a great debate movie about religion. It's a great horror movie. It's a great thriller. It's a great mystery. It's a great musical. And it combines them all so well. And like when you read about the sort of the history of this movie and how it came to be, and, you know, that fact, I think it was going to be just like a B feature, really, where it was back in the day you would go to the cinema and you would be paying to see 2 movies. It sounds like it had such an exciting history, and I think it truly is one of the greatest movies of all time, not just one of the greatest Scottish movies. And I think we're truly blessed to have a movie like that is one of our own, and I think it's fantastic, and I love it each time I watch. And I'm lucky that I think it maybe at least once a year we get the chance to see it on the big screen here in Edinburgh. And I saw it a few years ago as a double feature with Don't Look Now, which was really awesome. And there was one year even it just sort of landed being screened on my birthday, which was pretty cool. So I think I'm so glad that both of us have got a consensus on The Wicker Man as number one.
I mean, it was actually originally a B movie, and it actually originally played with Don't Look Now back in the 70s. Could you imagine that kind of double bill back then? I mean, you go along to see Don't Look Now, but you also get The Wicker Man, and I mean, it's got one of the most famous, making of stories about how, they found film reels. It was meant to be, they were going to, be tarmacked over, they were going to be part of a motorway, but they were saved. Then Robin Hardy got to make the director's cut, which, some people still debate which one is better. There's arguments for both actually, but I mean, you can see what is the original film, what isn't, because the quality of the prints is so extreme that you can actually tell shot from shot what is and what isn't. But I mean, it's got so many iconic moments as well. And I remember seeing, there was a play called I think In Search of the Wicker Man. It was by one of the guys, Greg Hempel from who did Still Games. I saw it at His Majesty's Theatre in Aberdeen, and it's a great spin on the story about this theatre company who are wanting to put on a play version of The Wicker Man, but the lead actor has gone missing, so they get this substitute guy in, and then things happen during the performance which he thinks is a bit odd. And I remember how they really originally wanted to end the performance was that at the end is this, they have a Wicker Man and it goes on fire, and they basically wanted it to end with the fire alarms going off and everyone being evacuated from the theatre but then not let back in. That was the end of the show, but they knew that they had to end it with a proper ending, but that was such a ballsy ending. I wish they would have done that because it would have been so funny. But it's inspired so many different things. League of Gentlemen is one of my all-time favourite comedy shows, and there's some great homages to the Wicker Man in that, and it's just one of the all-time greats.
And I think I love as well that they actually did make and burn a Wicker Man, and like for years the stumps were there, and sort of, I think it's the southwest coast of Scotland, and they were visited by fans who would take photos, and it was a bit of a pilgrimage. And then the stumps that were left were cut down and stolen in 2006, so somewhere out there in someone's garden is all of these what's it called, Wicker Man stumps somewhere. Someone has stolen them, and I'd love to know who stole them. It's disgraceful.
It's inspired so many different things. I mean, you've got, Wicker Man festivals now, and, where they all burn things as well. And Reece Shearsmith from League of Gentlemen, every May Day, he always tweets, does a live tweet of his holiday where he's basically going, and it's all the shots from the film about how the locals seem nice and stuff like that and things like that. And then he stops, at one point, when he's got his costume, he basically off to the May Day parade, and then you don't hear from him again for the rest of the day. And it's always quite funny. But it's inspired so many great things, and it's one of the best. And if you've never seen it, please see this one. Do not watch the Nicolas Cage version. Watch the original, and then maybe watch that 20-minute edited down bizarre moments from the Nicolas Cage Wicker Man remake, and it's just that's a whole other story.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We'd love to know what your favourite Scottish movies are, or moments, or characters.
But I just wanted to bring up one quick thing. Yesterday we got the sad news that Stan Lee had actually passed away at the age of 95, and I just wanted to sort of mention here, what a huge influence he was on me growing up. Reading all the comics and stuff like that. He made my childhood a better place. He was one of those people who defined my childhood, and I just wanted to say to Stan the man, thank you, Excelsior, and enough said. I mean, what was your experience of Stan Lee growing up? Were you like me and sort of got into the comics and stuff like that, and then again with the movies and things?
Yeah, it was always sort of the TV shows perhaps of the 90s that really kind of started to keep with me. And I was sitting there thinking, and a friend of mine and of yours as well, Ross, shared some photos of what he looked like as a younger man, and I was sitting there thinking, I think he was always this age, that he genuinely was one of these people that seemed like he was going to live forever, and was always this classy, fun, older guy. And, he's had the one thing is, he's dead. But it doesn't feel sad. It's like he's had an incredible innings. He has seen and done so much. For someone that was so elderly, he lived a very full life and a very exciting life. And I think he's someone that, he may be gone, but, I think we're all sitting there with a wee smile on our face, and people are sharing fun stories, exciting stories about his work, and, trading all these different photos you're seeing of him online. It seems like everyone, including yourself, and, everyone has met him. I never met him, but I think it's one of these ones. I think when people are sharing happy stories and good stories about someone, and you're not sitting there thinking taken too soon, you're thinking what a great life. And I think that's
absolutely.
Testament to the
And
man.
I mean, I was tweeting yesterday how I was lucky enough to meet him at the New York Comic Con about 5 years ago. I queued for about 6 hours to meet him, and it was totally worth it. Got to tell him what his work had meant to me, and shook his hand and stuff like that, and it was just great. But like you say, I mean, he's led such an amazing life, and he lived to a point where he got to see these characters that he created, along with the likes of Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. I know there's controversy in the past about who owned which character and the rights and stuff like that, but that was all sorted out, and he got to see these characters become the most popular franchise in the world. And he may be gone, but his legacy will live on forever. And it's just a great thing to see so much love pouring. I mean, yesterday on Twitter, my entire Twitter feed was people tweeting about Stan Lee and stuff like that. So, I know that I follow the right people on Twitter, because, yeah, it's such a sad loss. But like you say, it's such a joyous game to see all these wonderful memories and stuff like that. And, Robert Downey Jr. put on Instagram, I owe everything to you. And, we owe a lot to Stan, and thank you, Stan.
Absolutely. So, I think you said it best, and it's probably the best way to wrap it up. But Excelsior.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.